Hi everybody, it's Nicholas Bradford with the National Center for Restorative Justice. I just wanted to give you a little update that David Levine and I are working on a book. Pretty excited about that. We're kind of midway through and it'll be published sometime next year. I'm pretty excited, obviously, to give you the news and to also sort of make sure that you're aware of that. So when time comes, you can order a copy, find a copy, share a copy. But one of the things that comes out of that writing process is really some principles that we operate from. And a lot of folks will call us or ask us, like, is this thing that I'm doing restorative? Is this restorative justice? Is this a restorative practice? And I would say no to the first one and yes to the second one. No, that's not restorative justice. Restorative justice is a mindset, a way of being. It's not necessarily a strategy or conversation or whatever. It's really this way of being in the world where I feel restorative justice really makes sense is when teachers and myself are saying, like, oh, I'm doing this with my spouse. I'm really trying to engage in relationship building while in conflict with my kid. I'm really not kind of thinking that punishment is going to get me the outcomes that I'm looking for, but in fact, having dialogue and what behavior change takes time and things like that. So that's that restorative justice, like, mindset shift that needs to take place, and the restorative practices are the tools and components in that. So if somebody comes to me or our organization and says, like, hey, is this a thing that is restorative? I go back to these 5 principles all the time, and it's really, do we have the conflict language? Do we have an attitude that conflict happens, or are we trying to suppress it? Are we engaging all stakeholders? Are we empowering the author and the victim? Are we developing agency and valuing empathy? And kind of overarching all of those things and all those different components, we want to be thinking about equity and how are we kind of embodying or instilling equitable outcomes in those circumstances of conflict. And so those are the 5 principles plus 1 that we work from all the time. When folks ask me, is this restorative? I ask myself, and then I ask them, well, how are we engaging more people in this process? How are we empowering both victims and authors in this process? Whether it's, some work out of Portland in domestic violence circumstances, or in schools, or in an elementary school, or in the community, or in a soccer team. Like, it doesn't matter where, in the home. How are we empowering people to advocate for themselves if they've been impacted by harm? And how are we advocating for or making space for authors to repair and make amends in meaningful ways after they've done something harmful? An old colleague of mine often said, like, we are notoriously good at outsourcing our conflict, whether it's from a young age in the home, where we're telling on our brothers and sisters and saying, hey, so-and-so's like teasing me, or so-and-so, my brother is like on my side of the room, or is taking my toy, or my sister's done this, or she's like looking at me weird, all through school, and thinking about, like, teacher, like, elementary school. Like, it's funny that, like, kids are always, like, it's nice in many respects that they trust their teachers to take care of them. It's also a short-sighted approach. This is no shade on teachers. I think it's important that we recognize this, that young people need to develop the skills early on to how to manage their own conflict. And then into high school, where it's kind of the same thing, but there's a lot of, like, they're not engaging those conflicts, but they're actually, like, talking to their friends and trying to get their friends to support them, because if they have enough friends supporting them, then they can sort of overpower this thing. We're constantly outsourcing, and obviously in the community, we seek out police and judges, lawyers all the time to reconcile our conflict. And so we're really good at outsourcing our conflict. So just be aware of that. Think about that when you're working, and when you're thinking about how do we create systems. Are we kind of maximizing these 5 principles and then developing or kind of creating equitable outcomes for folks across both racial and gender and and socioeconomic status, all these kind of components that make up culture, and really valuing those things as important to not squash. So again, thank you, and look forward to seeing folks in person soon.